It's so funny because I hate listening to podcasts when one of the people is sick because I then start to feel like I'm sick.
Hmm.
So I'm going to try my best to only speak when I have something of value.
Well, today we're going to Mexico.
Oh my God, let's go. Vámonos.
Oh, wow. That would be actually, I don't know, under this context, this is, you know,
Yeah, you're like,
I'm not
today we're
even.
going to Mexico and we're going to get murdered because that's what my story is about.
Okay, so right from the jump, I am kind of no holds barring today
Okay.
because I learning about this story, watching things, reading things, I was only filled with uh pretty seething rage
Okay.
for many different reasons, but one thing that actually surprised me, didn't surprise me once I realized what was actually underneath my rage is that this story was so incredibly sensationalized
Hmm.
and it took on its own kind of life force through media.
Of course.
We're going back to April 9th, 1989.
Okay.
Mexican federal police officers follow a truck down a dirt road outside Matamoros. I think it's Tamaulipas,
Okay.
to a ranch called Santa Elena. They were there because a cult member named Serafin Hernandez had blown through the checkpoint, believing himself, are you ready for this? As supernaturally invisible.
This feels familiar.
Obviously, he was not invisible.
How do you know that the people at the checkpoint didn't just have supernatural sight?
Supernatural sight. There's so many things I can say, and I will set them aside. So, he led them straight to the place that he was trying to protect. The ranch looked ordinary from the road. It was, in fact, the home to a cult that we are going to talk about today.
Okay.
There was a farmhouse, there were outbuildings, and there was a shed. And investigators described smelling it before they opened
Oh.
it.
Oh no.
There are going to
Because there
be,
was so much mint inside.
because there's so much herb. Have you ever
Smelled
heard of a
really
simmer pot?
fresh. What
That's
is
what was happening, except with like body parts.
mm,
So it wasn't giving like,
mm.
welcome in.
You was on the wrong Pinterest pin.
He was on the dark web version of Pinterest. Jesus.
Disinterest.
So imagine inside.
I don't want
You
to.
open up this shed. There are going to be several things that I'm going to mention that I am not going to, again, like Heather and I always do, I will not be going into detail. However, if you look up the story and you go further and I just forewarning that there is plenty of very deeply disturbing, gory, graphic detail in this story that I will not be, I'm just going to say very generalized here. Okay.
Yeah.
So inside this shed are melted candles, a crude altar, lots of ritual objects, iron, wire, animal remains. And then in the center of the room, there's this large cauldron, which has its own in. It's difficult to, we're going to get into. I'm not going to call this cauldron by its like sacred cultural practice name because what they were doing was not actually the religion that was obviously being quote unquote practiced. This entire story is about the perversion of a very sacred and deeply meaningful religion out of Africa.
Okay.
So obviously, this shed is not the place that you want to be. Okay. Imagine there's a lot of just things that you're not understanding in front of you if you're an investigator. There's lots of stuff that just doesn't make any sense. And inside the cauldron were, like we were joking about, human remains, not sliced oranges. Um, Again, intergraphic detail here with lots of wire-bound sticks and herbs matted into a lot of biological matter, I will say.
Ugh.
Um, Investigators had no framework, obviously, for what they were looking at. I can only fathom what they thought was happening. And so, what they did call it was a witchcraft pot. They called it voodoo. And the Mexican press called it satanic. And all throughout American television, they were discussing how it was black magic.
Well, it's so funny because even though we know that there's a very big misunderstanding in what all of those words actually mean,
Mm-hmm.
I would say that this is the only time that that sort of makes sense
Mm-hmm.
versus especially what we were saying over here in the US was
Mm-hmm.
probably, satanic rituals
Right.
because any sort of cauldron calls to mind, of course, a lot of stereotypes
Mm-hmm.
just from, children's stories. But
Mm-hmm.
to have remains in that, it's like, yeah, you know what? Maybe something weird here.
Something's going on here. And to your point, it is very fair for people to think that it's like dark and really inhumane what's happening
Mhm.
because it was.
Yeah.
And to understand what was going on in this shed, we're gonna go way back. And where we're gonna go back to is the Congo Basin, centuries before Metamoros even existed. What we're gonna do is lay out the actual cultural practices of Central Africa and the Bantu world. That's where we're starting with what's considered Palo Mayombe. Have you ever heard of
Okay.
this?
No, I haven't.
It's also called Las Reglas de Condo, or simply put Palo. Many people just refer to it as Palo. And it is one of the oldest continuously practiced African diasporic religions in the Western Hemisphere.
Hmm.
So its roots lie in Bantu speaking peoples of Central Africa, primarily from the region now encompassing the Democratic Republic of Congo, Angola, and surrounding areas.
Okay.
The Bantu are not one people, but they're a vast linguistic and culturally diverse family. Hundreds of different ethnic groups spread across sub Saharan Africa and connected by related languages, and in many different cases, overlapping spiritual frameworks. So, not the same exact spiritual practices, but overlapping. And among the most significant of these groups for understanding Palo are the Bakongo people, who have a cosmological system called the Congo cosmogram that became the spiritual skeleton of their traditions. Is any of this, because I had never heard of any of this,
No.
this was such an enjoyable thing to learn about. So the Congo cosmogram is a cross inside a circle representing the four moments of the sun and the cyclical movement between the world of the living and the world of the dead. This is not a symbol of death, but of continuity. There's an understanding that the existence doesn't end at death, but it transforms, moving across a threshold that can be crossed in both directions through a ritual. So,
Okay. I feel like this didn't a really similar sign come up in the Crossroads story,
mm-hmm. Yes,
right? Didn't it?
yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm. You briefly touched on similar. Well, I was thinking that it
That
may be one
symbol.
of those like overlapping. Yes, those
Mm-hmm.
crossroads. Mm-hmm. This cosmological framework is foundational. So, conceptually, the dead are not gone, they're still present, active, and accessible
Cool. Okay.
through different types of practices and rituals. So, we're going to talk a little bit about what that looks like. So, beginning in the 16th century, enslaved Bakongo and other Bantu speaking peoples were transported to Cuba, Brazil, Puerto Rico, and throughout the Caribbean and the Americas. And obviously, one of the greatest historical atrocities that has ever existed. The Portuguese were among the first to establish slave trade routes from Central America to Cuba specifically. So the knowledge of how to communicate with the dead, how to build containers for spirit, and how to maintain relationships across this membrane between worlds stayed consistent. So in Cuba, under the brutality of colonial slavery and Catholic domination, the knowledge went underground and practitioners encoded their traditions in Catholic language.
Of course.
Yeah, because how else would you survive? How else would these traditions survive?
Yeah, that's so clever.
So saints became masks for African spiritual forces. Rituals continued in secret, and the tradition survived through initiated lineages. So think chains of transmission from teacher to student, godparent to godchild, that stretched these unbroken connections from Central Africa to present day. So what exactly is Palo Mayombe? So Palo is a natural-based tradition rooted in a relationship between the living and the dead, like we said, and the natural world. Its name comes from the Spanish word for stick or branch, palo, reflecting the central role of sacred wood, plants, and natural materials in this practice. The core cosmological principles of Palo Mayombe, the universe in Palo thought, is animated by Nkisi, a divine force or energy, and governed by Mpungus, which are primal spiritual forces or these divine energies. And they're somewhat similar to like Santeria or the Loal in Haitian voodoo. So each Mpungu governs a particular domain, which makes me think of a couple of the other religious practices that we talked about. So these particular domains are the forest, the cemetery, the wind, the sea, iron, illness, and healing.
I like that the cemetery has its own.
It has its own Mpungus.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, so the major ones include Zarabanda, which is over iron, war, justice, associated with roads and crossroads.
Crossroads. Yep.
And then we have the Tiembla Tierra, the ancient one, earth, wisdom, foundations of existence, the Madre de Agua, which, as you can guess, is based out of the water, feminine, divine, healing, and emotions. The Scintille Ndoki is lightning storms, the cemetery, and fierce feminine. So that was cool that it was like all connected, like lightning storms in the cemetery just like makes sense, you know? And then the last one that we'll talk about is Lucero Mundo, the dawn, communication, doorways, and the liminal, which is, I was like, okay, this is right up our alley. This is so much of what we talk about is liminal space. So the dead, called Nfumbi or Keomba, are understood as retaining consciousness, personality, and power after death. They exist in a parallel state capable of perceiving and influencing the living world and capable of being engaged in ongoing relationship with the living.
That makes sense.
So the heart of the practice is where a lot of this kind of exists with like this cauldron. Okay. So the Nganga, also called Prenda or Nkisi, is the central ritual object of Palo. It is typically an iron cauldron or a clay pot containing a carefully assembled world in miniature. So think earth from specific places, the graveyard, the forest, crossroads, the home, sacred sticks and roots, animal remains, stones, iron implements, and in traditional practice, human bones.
Okay, but just the bones.
Just the bones. Here's the thing though. This element, these human bones, this is the most important part, is that it requires obviously a deep understanding for and processing of what that even means. So in traditional practices that contain the human bone, it's typically a skull or skeleton fragments, but they're obtained from the dead through ethical means, and historically, this means that the remains legally are purchased from medical suppliers or obtained from cemeteries with permission from the person who died.
Sorry, I'm just laughing because I'm thinking like, or they just send an invoice to Body's World and they're like,
and then they're like, "Hey, you guys, this is
you're just gonna like grab a skull from you."
Yeah, just get
Doesn't really matter where it came from.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Here for our Horror Bodies World episode for the fucked up world of the Bodies World exhibit. Also, something really cool that I found fascinating is that sometimes these human remains were also passed down through lineages. So it's like you get like your great great grandfather's skull to put in your nganga,
That's
and
pretty
like
sick.
isn't that so sick?
This is a family heirloom. Literally.
Literally.
This is the family.
This is the family. Can't get any more family heirloom than that. So the bones themselves were invitations, this physical point of contact that was specific Nfumbi, a dead person whose spirit has agreed and consented through divine ritual to be there and enter into relationship with the living practitioner.
Their spirit has given consent.
Or before they pass too. Like
Okay.
there's many different routes.
Sure.
But one of them is that
that's one of them.
Mm-hmm. Correct. So it is a relationship. The Nfumbi housed in the Nganga has a name, a personality, particular preferences and dislikes. The practitioner feeds the Nganga. It could be with rum, tobacco, animal blood, specific foods. And
this I've heard of.
And so it is not it's not as tribute to the Ngange, right? It's like it's not a tribute, it's like the maintenance of this like reciprocal bond.
Yeah, it's like you're actually taking care of its life force.
Literally, you take care of the spirit takes care of you.
Yeah.
So that's the foundation for what it's supposed to be. Okay. So that's where we're starting.
Okay.
So obviously the Nganga is understood as a concentrated point of what we've talked about is Nkisi, which is this living force capable of healing, protection, divination, and justice, and not a weapon by nature, but again, a tool for relationship. So there are several different aspects to Palo that are important to recognize. One of them is the initiation tradition. And you don't just decide. And you and I both know this after learning so much about many different practices, both culturally, historically, religion based, whatever the case may be. You don't just decide to simply start practicing something.
Yeah.
So you don't just pick it. You're actually received into a lineage through a formal initiation process overseen by what's called a Tata Nganga, which is a male priest, which literally means father of the Nganga, or Yaya Nganga, which is a female priest. And I was like, love that there's a male and a female priest. It's so sick. So this process creates a genuine bond of spiritual kinship, and the initiation became part of the what's called mananso, or the house or community, with obligations to each other and to the lineage stretching back through time, like very, very, very long time. So the tata or yaya is a teacher and a spiritual parent presence. And they're not an authority figure. They don't demand anything like obedience from you. It's just that they guide you almost like it's like a mentor. Mm-hmm, exactly. So the relationship is a transmission. It's this mutual accountability and is a part of a greater community. Okay.
It's like Big Brothers of America.
Yes. And I stay saying that. And actually, that's my next sentence. That's crazy. How did did I share my notes with you already?
Yeah, I had your Google Doc pulled up.
Okay, so I do have an entire section of the 2 paths within Palo that you can be brought in through divination. We're going to put pins in those. If you're super curious about it, I'll put them in the show notes where you can learn more about them, but we're getting really in the weeds there, and I kind of want to get a little bit, into how all of this is applicable.
The meat of this story.
So the most important part with me laying the foundation here is that Palo is not inherently evil.
Of course not.
It's not tied to any sort of like demonic forces, Satanism, these dark forces of whatever this practicing cultural, all these rituals, this, it's not inherently cosmically or inherently evil, but it is natural forces which could be potentially dangerous and require respect and deep skill and knowledge and cultural competence to engage in. And again, it's not voodoo, it's not black magic. It is a complete cosmological system with its own ethics, aesthetics, community structures, spiritual goals, and practitioners. Who practices Palo today? There are hundreds of thousands of practitioners globally. Cuba, Puerto Rico, United States, Venezuela, Panama, and even in Europe. And it is a living tradition with active lineages, ordained priests, and ongoing ritual communities. There are people who do just like you and I do. They go to a job, they do their thing, they have kids, they have families, and they also practice this as part of their spiritual and religious lives.
Yeah.
And again, it is rooted in one of the oldest surviving African religious traditions in our awareness and knowledge.
Wow.
So, with all of that groundwork laid down, now we're going to talk about how it was completely perversed
Yeah.
and used and weaponized. So, who is Adolfo Constanzo? You've never heard of his name before.
I don't think I have.
Well, he's a controversial figure, and if you look his name up, there are, when I tell you, Heather, I don't know that I would say the only other person that I have looked up that had this many results would have been like something like the Manson family, or I'm thinking like the Zodiac killer, like, people who have thousands and thousands of videos, if not tens of thousands of people. There's just so much content online about this man, and all of it is that he was a black magic like very dark,
Yeah.
very sensationalized.
Right.
So he was born November 1st, 1962 in Miami. Ironically, it is both All Saints Day and the Day of the Dead in Catholic tradition. His mother, Aurora Gonzalez, which later her last name was Constanza, where his name came from, was a Cuban immigrant who had him at 15. Can't imagine having a child at 15 years old. It's literally
Wow. Oh
his father did die when he was an infant. There's not really any information that we know about him. So his mom at some point had remarried twice, and the family moved frequently between Miami and Puerto Rico.
Okay.
So there is a lot of very, what I would say, influencing or biased stuff. A lot of the content that I read and listened to about his mother is that she introduced him to Palo Mayombe at a very young age, and he was initiated into the practice at just as a child. And then everyone always mentions that she got in trouble multiple times for being a thief, and that she stole things. And I just think that that's really fascinating.
Probably had to, right? She was the mother of multiples before she was even like 17.
It's one of those things where they were like, and she was a thief. And it's like, shut the actual fuck up.
So was Aladdin, and everybody loves that movie.
Literally, don't get me started. So I was like, already just like, why is everyone talking about how his mom had to steal things? This is crazy. And a lot of the media and the influence is basically saying that Adolfo grew up watching her navigate between a spiritual practice and her being a criminal. And so it lays the groundwork that basically he's watching his mom be a criminal and also practice this like Palo Mayombe.
No, he's watching his mother provide for him.
Please.
Okay, whatever.
Please. Yeah. So that is what everyone really runs off with whenever they're talking about him. It's like, and his mother was a criminal,
and
which makes sense.
Fault.
Yeah, which makes sense later on when you find out what he actually wound up doing and what's going on. It's like, okay, please.
Okay.
So as a teenager in Miami, he was drawn into the orbit of a prominent Santeria priest who recognized something in him that he was considered special, and that he, so much so that he became an informal apprentice as a teenager. But what the priest saw was something that some people would describe as supernatural, but really what it was is that he had like a very deep and acute awareness of how to engage with people. And he was incredibly charismatic, he's very intelligent, and
Yeah.
he also was incredibly attractive.
Okay, great. He's got all the
So
makings of a cult leader.
all of the makings of the cult leader
Yeah.
all lined up.
Check, check, check.
Yep. So it was known that he could read people very well with unsettling precision, as some people would say.
Uh,
Their desires, their thresholds, all the things. He had a pretty significant from the jump as a teenager. A really well known Santeria priest acknowledges that he can see something in him that's special. And then he's also deemed to be this incredibly intelligent and charismatic, like, young adult
yeah.
teenager. Constanzo arrives in Mexico City around 1983 as a 20-year-old. He positions himself immediately as a brujo, which for those of you listening is considered a male witch, a sorcerer for hire, he was considered. He targeted wealthy socialites, entertainers, and even models. So he charged really large fees and cultivated a mystique. He showed up late, he said very little, and he let clientele sit in silence in their own projections, which, as a therapist, I was like, hilarious.
But
Literally,
he's just an excellent con man.
he's just so his methods.
And if you let someone just be quiet long enough, inside or outside of therapy, they're going to start divulging stuff, whether they realize they're doing it or not.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden it's going to be like, oh my God, he was so insightful.
And
He knew
like,
so much.
as a 20-year-old, you know everything. When you're 20, you can't be told.
When you're 20 and everyone's already telling you that you're special.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I can't imagine. It all makes sense, is what I'm going to say.
Yeah.
So he unfortunately has a wealth of knowledge about these Palo Mayombe ritual practices that he grew up with his whole life. So he would divine for clients and make predictions based on careful observations and their demeanor, the information they disclosed. And when he was right, which skilled social readers often are, the client attributed it to supernatural powers. Confirmation bias, obviously, is a hell of a thing. So socialite years were just kind of, it was just like the perfect timing for all of this to really line up. Even thinking like in the 80s and 90s, like this just would really hit. Like this would be a good movie, you know what I mean? I get why this was so sensationalized. And his clientele then transferred over into drug traffickers. Yes.
Okay.
The cartel. Right. Because what is more enticing than getting involved in drug cartels?
Gosh, we're really playing with fire there, though.
Yeah,
that's his clientele.
That is his clientele. So the cartels are operating along the U.S.-Mexico border in the late 1980s, and obviously we're swimming in a lot of different stuff. But one of the things that I have never in my adult years contemplated, especially with all of my interest in all these things and how you and I are with being so fascinated with stuff by this, the concept that drug traffickers, sex traffickers, people who are in these groups where they're engaging in criminal activity
are also woo-woo.
They're superstitious as fuck.
Of course
they are. So this is the perfect clientele for him to get involved in. They were already woven into narco culture, and traffickers already paid for protection. They already had folks that were saints that protected them, and they already operated in a world where belief in protection was a rational response to constant mortal danger.
Yeah.
Because
Makes
of
sense.
course you're fearing for your life all the time.
Yeah.
So Constanzo offered something more formal and more powerful than the traditional folk remedies that everyone's used to. He offered an entire ritual system. So he brings in all of his knowledge about Palo into this space and teaches cartels or shows them about rituals and gangas, ceremonies, and claimed that it would make the shipments pass through checkpoints and make judges rule favorably and make bullets miss them and sometimes make them invisible.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is also really cute, though, the idea of like, oh, no, we can't do it tomorrow night. We have a little workshop. We're going to do some like DIY charm bags
and we're going
protection
to
spells.
And we're going to use the guy we just shot yesterday for not giving us our money in our Nganga.
Yeah.
We're just going to throw his remains right in there.
Yeah.
You know?
He said he was willing right at the
right,
that was his last words.
So there's there's a lot of stuff here that's like, okay, this does inherently, like as a whole, like Constanza coming in and being like, this is my end. Like this makes sense to me, but it gets dark really fast. It's like,
well, it's already dark,
really,
but I mean it is perfect.
It gets worse. It's worse. But okay. I mean, like honestly though, like for real, if we were to like lean into this, it really is. I was like, wow, what an opportunist. You know?
That's what I'm saying. He's got a hustle going.
Like any good cult leader. You know?
Yeah.
So he aligns himself.
Sorry, it's pouring rain and my neighbor's just out mowing his grass.
Are you serious?
Right? Like pouring rain and he's just like pushing the lawnmower. Like,
oh, it's a push lawnmower?
Yeah.
Also, cutting grass in the rain with it being all wet and sticky feels like it could be problematic.
I mean, it is pouring.
What is he doing out there? I'm assuming it's a man. I don't feel like a woman would do that.
Yeah, he's just out there cutting the grass. Anyway, sorry, I was so distracted because I was like,
no, that's pretty important.
So wet.
What a weird, you know, that it makes me feel like something that you would see like on TV when someone is going through like a midlife crisis. Maybe you should check on him.
Energy like of what I would do.
Maybe you should check on him.
This is like quirky white girl things of like, oh, that's just Heather. She loves to mow her grass in the rain. She's so silly.
It's just Heather.
That's just Heather. All right, sorry. That really took me out.
Also aligns himself with the Hernandez family. There's Elio, Ovidio, and Emilio.
Cute.
I know. They were not so cute, however. They manned the oh my god, hello. They ran the marijuana trafficking operations out of Matamoros and directly across the border from Brownsville, Texas. So
okay.
They gave him Rancho Santa Elena as his base, and he gave them the spiritual architecture of their entire operation.
Mm-hmm.
Thus begins some wild, crazy, fucked up cult shit.
Oh no.
So shipments got through, arrests never came for them, and whether it was through any sort of ritual practices or maybe the psychological benefit of fearlessness, that they were being protected, Constanzo's genuine intelligence is helping them operate more carefully as well.
Okay.
It results in them appearing to confirm, all of these things confirm his power.
Sure. It's just confirmation bias.
Exactly. This is the mechanism of all sustained magical thinking, obviously. The inner circle. Who was the inner circle of this cult, this ranch that we started off at, that the investigators found the shed in, or shed at? We have Sarah Aldrete. Sarah Aldrete. She was born in 1969, and she was a college student at both the Matamoros Institute of Technology and the Texas Southmost College in Brownsville, a Dean's List student by all accounts.
Wow.
Daily crossing the border in both directions. Athletic, outwardly, completely, would never think that this person was working for the cartel, and invisible as a cult participant, pretty much. So Constanzo made her his high priestess, an operational second in command. Her actual role in the killings that later on happened would remain debated, and she claimed coercion and fear throughout. While prosecutors argued active participation, she was ultimately convicted of murder and received 62 years in prison.
Okay.
Martin Quintana Rodriguez is one of Constanzo's lovers. Deeply devoted and present at the ranch. Later on, met her demise, and we'll get to that.
Okay.
Omar Francisco Ochoa, another inner circle member and intimate partner, was taken also later on in the story we'll get to. And two more people, Alvaro de Leon Valdez, or known as El Dubi, the enforcer, the man who actually pulled a trigger that actually ultimately later wound up resulting in Constanzo's death.
Oops.
The man who, at the end, a lot of things also happened, and he received 30 years in prison for how all this ended. And then the Hernandez brothers, which were the Elio, Ovidio, and Serafine. Serafine is the person that we started off with, who thought that they were invisible at the border, if you remember the beginning. This cartel infrastructure made everything possible, and when Elio was arrested, it displayed the brands of Constanzo had burned into his skin and told reporters that bullets would bounce off of him, and he believed it 1,000%.
Oh no.
So that's just a little example of like the kind of stuff that he had them believing.
Yeah.
Okay, so obviously Constanzo distorted a lot of stuff to get to this point. He didn't practice a dark version of Palo Mayombe. He just practiced what is literally not considered any sort of religious practice whatsoever, and he just modge-podged a bunch of stuff, which is so similar to so many other things that we've talked about.
Yep.
Where you cherry pick and you take what serves you and then you drop the rest of it, and then it therefore loses all of its sacredness and actually is deeply perverse and volatile.
Which is so funny because honestly, maybe this is a hot take, but that's what every religion is.
I was thinking that, I mean, like evangelicalism, modern day evangelicalism.
Like even the Christians that we like technically are doing that.
I know. I'm like, okay, there may not be skeletons in an iron cast cauldron, but they kind of metaphorically are. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So he wore the tradition's clothing while completely gutting it of all of its substance, as we're describing. So understanding exactly what he changed obviously reveals that every distortion served a single function, and that was consolidating his control in the whole entire experience. So what did he keep in these practices and these rituals? He kept the nganga because it was a physical object that people fear and revere, and that it was more powerful than an abstract claim. So that's what we found in the shed. The investigators found in the shed in the very beginning was the nganga, quote unquote nganga. It's not a real one. Having something in a actual physical space gave followers something concrete to be absolutely terrified of. The ritual language. So Congo-derived ceremonial language creates an in-group cohesion and the bars outsiders from understanding. So he used things in another language that would then encourage the coercion and control, and this mechanism of like obviously having a high control group that you're like, they don't understand what you're saying. You know, it's like, okay, well, that's just like a gimme. So he keeps the hierarchy of the initiation, and he kept the structure of the tata and the godchild godparent situation, because it gave him this like formal role of supreme authority over people, like in the cult itself. And it was obviously associated with obligations of obedience. So then that inherently also was not inherent to the actual practice of Palo. And then he also kept the concept of a bound spirit, but again, it was perverse. And legitimately, an initiated relationship creates a bond of reciprocity, like we talked about, earlier in the beginning. But he weaponized this, and he told his followers that their souls were inside the Nganga, and leaving meant that not just physical danger, but spiritual annihilation. And he threatened that if they left the group, that they would be tormented after death. So you're not engaging in a way where it's like you wouldn't have just this life and suffering, you would have eternal suffering.
Like Mormonism, kind of.
Kind of.
Like you can participate and have your eternal family, or it can suck forever.
Yeah. And then you're like bound. Like you're it's like this sort of spiritual imprisonment.
Yeah.
And like torture. Yeah. So here's the things that were a little perverted. We're gonna get into like what the fuck did he do? Obviously, as we talked about, traditional Ngangas use the bones of already dead and ethically obtained individuals. Dead persons' spirits are asked through divination and by other means, maybe before they even pass, whether they consent to the relationship. Constanza invented the idea that the Nganga required the energy of a violent death. And specifically, that the more a victim suffered before dying, the more powerful the charge will be. Obviously, this is entirely fabricated, and it exists nowhere in Palo doctrine, legitimate or otherwise.
Whoa.
Mm-hmm. The theology of suffering. He decided he was going to throw that in there. The idea that terror and pain at the moment of death produced spiritually potent material in Constanza's invention. It served his psychology, obviously, as he appeared to be some sort of sadist.
I was about to say, so he's a sadist.
He's a sadist. So
and
obviously,
he's telling people that are not afraid to be violent
to be violent. So here is why I am very intentional and from the jump, and is that we're talking about all these things and excluding the context that when I tell you deeply violent, graphic, suffering, things that are unfathomable that they did to these people's bodies are like wild. And in total, when they did find the property and they found everyone's remains, there were about 20 victims in total. Yeah.
I actually expected it to be more.
Well, they got caught. I think there would have been many, 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 many more, but there's actually a college student who they captured and murdered. And because he was an American, and they usually only killed people who were, of course, unhoused or people who were, I would assume, something like sex workers, things like that, where they're like on the fringes of society already as these sacrifices.
It got too much attention.
They were upping the ante, and then they kidnapped this white, very like American, blonde-haired American guy who got a lot of attention, and that ultimately led to them being found out and them finding his remains and finding everything. So we'll talk a little bit about him as well, and it's really frustrating. If this is such a tricky thing to talk about, and this is literally, again, why you and I decided to do this, is I obviously think that it is absolutely egregious that anyone is murdered and quite literally dismembered, and that their body is so deeply disrespected in life and death. And it is so incredibly frustrating that it has to take a white American boy to be killed in order for something to be drawn attention to, sensationalized, and then completely blown apart. And thankfully, it stopped. Like, right, they got everyone. Constanza, winds up not surviving a siege later on whenever the police get involved. So there is so much to this story that I'm not including in this. This is just obviously like a very brief, gentle overview, but I wanted to center the fact that through all of this sensationalism, what is completely missed is that he didn't actually practice Palo Mayombe. He didn't actually, he just like to your point, just
like
what
a
happens.
Scapegoat.
Exactly. It's a husk of what is an intentional, meaningful practice that was then used to exploit and literally murder people. And have a bunch of henchmen do it for you, and have an entire cult, and have everyone under your leadership. And he also he used this like whole like lineage concept as well. So like, as we talked about in Genuine Palo, leaving a lineage is possible. So in true Palo Mayombe, you can leave and not be punished for leaving the lineage. So if your family are practitioners and you decide not to do it anymore, you don't have any sort of like inherent punishment or divine punishment for that. So Constanzo, as we talked about, used that against his followers, and he told them that their essence was bound inside the Nganga and that departure would completely destroy them. And it made exiting the cult literally impossible, psychologically for people. So also the other thing too is like using himself as the sole intermediary. So in a legitimate practice, the relationship between the practitioner and their Nganga and their Mpungus and their Mfumbi is direct and personal. And the Tata, the guides, the mentors, these parent-like roles, they transmit, but they don't monopolize access.
Right. So
they assist, but it's not like you have to go through this inherently to get to speak with the dead. So Constanzo positions himself as the only conduit between his followers and these spiritual forces that he claims to be in command. And there's no relationship except through him, which is obviously not a part of true Palo Mayombe.
Right.
So this is obviously a deep defining feature of occultic religious distortion across every tradition that we could probably find in anything we've talked about thus far on different episodes. And lastly, the selection of the victims. So nothing in Palo Mayombe or any path in any lineage sanctions the abduction or murder of any human beings. And the Palo framework of working with the dead assumes that the dead died by natural or at least non-ritual means. Like they've passed from some sort of natural or organic
certainly not
process.
Torturous.
And not torturous. So what Constanzo created was an original theology that was literally murder, and it was borrowed cosmological framework. So we know why the cartel was the perfect audience for this. I have a whole section about that, but as you and I have already discussed, it was extremely opportunistic, and this is already a culture existing inside of magical thinking, because that is what helped them feel like that they were going to survive these very like unsurvivable, how do you say that? Unsurvivable like jobs that they're doing.
Yeah.
And also too, something that I've across, I'm sure globally, of like just patterns of organized crime They already use things like blood oaths, initiation rituals, and shared transgressions to create bonds that are both spiritual and quote unquote legal, right?
Yeah.
So there's like already these like initiation rites that you take whenever you like enter like the mafia or like a cartel group or something, right? Um, so who was traditionally chosen? I already kind of laid into this a little bit, but Constanzo selected victims along a logic, and it's basically whose people's disappearances would not generate any sort of institutional response.
Sure.
So again, think sex workers, think people who were already in violence and who were already kind of within these spaces where if they were to go missing, people would be like either not notice or be like, that makes sense. You know, we already know what happened to them kind of stuff. So we don't have the names of everybody. Like we just don't. So there are 16 confirmed victims and 26 total suspected, but because of the
Whoa.
condition that they were found in,
Yeah.
it's really hard to tell how many victims there were.
Gosh.
So I'm just going to list off really quickly the people that we do know and they have names for. Mark James Kilroy was a 21-year-old pre-med student at the University of Texas. This specific person is
the white
the
guy.
young man that kind of blew everything wide open. And he was from Santa Fe, Texas. Gilberto Sosa was killed the same week as Kilroy and was engaged and was used as part of a ritual and as insurance for a shipment they were doing. Ezekiel Rodriguez Luna was a police officer. Ruben Garza was a cartel associate. Jose Luis Garcia Luna, believed to be a rival or an informant of some kind. He was also used for a ritual. And then many other Mexican nationals whose names appear in court records but received literally no press coverage. So the only people's that maybe like 10 or so more people, and then a 14-year-old boy's remains were recovered from the property, and in details that I won't describe. But there were this was mentioned in Wire reports from 1989, and then they just it wasn't ever picked back up by the media. As we close, we're going to talk a little bit about the person who kind of blew the case wide open. Mark Kilroy vanished on March 14th of 1989 after a night out in Calais, Obregon. This bar was popular with American college students across from the line from Brownsville. He was separated from three friends, all former high school teammates of his from Santa Fe, Texas. His uncle was a U.S. Customs agent. His family launched into immediate action, an aggressive public campaign. The case received television coverage across both countries, both Mexico and the United States, and Texas politicians contacted Mexican federal authorities directly. It was like it was a big deal, and the pressure from this broke the case. The pattern of disappearances had been accumulating for years, but the pressure of his family is what obviously got it to be further investigated. There were many victims, but Mark being the one that really initiated all of this attention. Everything that I listened to in his disappearance was that he was basically off with his friends. They were like either walking back home or had left a bar, and he went to go to the bathroom. And two of the members of the cult scooped him up and took him to the ranch. And when they found him, his remains were, and in all cases, everyone's remains, there are clear signs of extreme torture before they were murdered. And some people actually, there was an entire family that was like killed and thrown into the river, but there's not really any information as to whether that was a ritual, but they were tied to that as well. So even though that their remains weren't found on the ranch, there's another 4 people or so, of an entire family that was killed. So Mark was the, I guess, like what you could consider some sort of like sacrificial lamb of find it to bring investigators to better understand or to find out exactly what was happening. But it's
I was
also really confusing.
thinking, because it's just like, thank goodness for it being him and his family for treating it the way they did, but also how horrible that
Mm-hmm.
it took another person's life to,
Mm-hmm.
finally bring that attention to anyone else's. It's bad every way around.
I
It's
know.
just tragic.
And it's really, I'm just so kind of flabbergasted at like how all this goes, because had this checkpoint situation not happened, I don't really know. It's hard to tell, right? Like, would they have ever found him? Did they? Do you know what I
True.
mean? So
Yeah.
on April 1st, this where we began from the, our story from the very beginning. Serafine Hernandez, who was a cult member, had been told by Constanza that his magic made him invisible to law enforcement. So he drives right past this federal checkpoint.
They forgot to do the magic on the car.
That's what it was. It was the car. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Because he believed he couldn't be seen. And again, like I said from the beginning, and everyone followed him to the ranch, Santa Elena. The initial search turned up 65 pounds of marijuana and the ritual shed. So they find some drugs, they find this shed, and local officers confront what he's like, they're like, what is this pot with all this stuff in it? And reportedly they refused to continue investigation until a what's called a curandero was brought into to cleanse the site.
Wow.
So it's
Sure.
some sort of like spiritual shaman or priest or something, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Reflecting how deeply the folk belief in the power of such an object ran among people in, these spaces and maybe even law enforcement. So as the
Yeah.
investigation expands, bodies are recovered from shallow graves across the property. All the cult members are put into custody, and the count climbed all the way up into the 20s. And Mark was among one of them. He had been completely dismembered, and there were places strewn all over, basically. Constanzo had already fled to Mexico at this point, to Mexico City. And by the time that the police raided him and the group that he was with, he was accompanied by Sarah Aldrete and Martin Quintana and Omar and these other brothers. And for nearly a month, they hid in an apartment in a neighborhood in Mexico City. And on May 6th of 1989, police responded to a noise complaint in the area. Constanzo, apparently in a state of acute paranoia, began burning cash on a stove and throwing bundles of bills from the windows.
Whoa.
Officers drawn by the disturbance surrounded the building, and a 45-minute gun battle follows. And
Holy
as the
cow.
police close in, Constanzo embraces Martin Quintana and instructed by El Jubi to shoot them both. He complies, and he later said he did it because Constanzo told him to, and by that point, he could not imagine disobeying him.
Whoa.
Constanzo was 26 years old.
Wow.
And the rest of them were taken alive. And then there were trials. So for years, trials went on. And Sarah Aldrete, Alvaro de la Leon Valdez, Elio Hernandez, and Serafine Hernandez all got between 62 years and 30 years for murders and drug trafficking.
Wow.
And then several other cult members received sentences ranging from 30 to 60 years. And that is the case of Adolfo Constanzo and Palo Mayombe. And I have a whole section here about what harm he did and what the media did to Palo Mayombe and the spiritual and religious practices of.
That's the thing, because it really
Mm-hmm.
is another victim.
Mm-hmm.
The faith itself, and for the practitioners who do it
Mm-hmm.
correctly and accordingly and appropriately and reverently.
Yep.
But also, I mean, what a perfect case study on how dangerous vulnerability can be and superstition,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because there is such a fine line between the superstition that I practice, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to break a mirror. I don't want to
Mm-hmm.
walk under a ladder. Like, those are things I actually actively in my life worry about doing, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Versus listening to someone telling you, hey, this really dangerous thing you're doing, I can protect you. And you just
Yeah.
have to kill some people, especially
Mm-hmm.
if you're someone who's going, oh, I already do that.
Yeah, you're
So,
already conditioned to be
yeah,
subject to having, you're already obeying a divine authority of some kind.
right. It seems efficient, honestly, right? To
Yeah.
say,
Mm-hmm.
I'm already committing violence, if now it can also serve me because I need it for this thing.
Mm-hmm.
What a case. I have said it before and I'll say it again. I'm pretty sure Criminal Minds did a story about this guy.
That makes sense.
I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure.
Yeah.
I should say a story inspired by
Right.
this guy.
Right.
But I feel like I hadn't heard that actual name, and I'm surprised because this sounds like it was obviously a
Yeah.
huge deal for a myriad of reasons.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the thing about sensationalism too, is it's such a shame for all these victims that ultimately it became a story about
Him being a Satanist and a black magic practitioner, and him
versus
being.
the victims. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I didn't spend a lot of time on him intentionally, obviously, and we don't really know much of anything, hardly at all, about the victims except for Mark himself. And all of that information, both about Constanzo and Mark, is vast online. Like, you can
Yeah.
find so much of that information online. And nothing that I read or listened to did any kind of concentration around what it actually is that they were doing,
Yeah.
you know? So
Well,
it's really dark and twisted, and it's really unfortunate because, to your point, this is no different than the perversion of other religious practices.
I think you did a great job,
Thank you.
and I think it's important, to give back that power, I guess maybe no pun intended, to the faith itself, and to
Mhm.
remind people that it is not a gross, terrible, icky, dark thing at all.
No,
And just
no.
because you slap the same label on it and use a
Mhm.
couple of the, sort of basic outlines of a practice doesn't
Mhm.
mean that what you're doing at all reflects everyone else.
Yeah.
So,
And
uh,
from a greater, grander, like 14,000-foot view, it's just such an intense and deeply disturbing example of the depth of racism
uh,
and
yeah.
in media.
Well, wonderful job. This was upsetting and enlightening.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. We'll see you later.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.